Yes, what's going on, peeps, man? Back in the building. Hope everybody is blessed. So today I wanted to talk about Viktor Gyökeres. Obviously, we saw Arsenal winning 5-0 against Leeds to go top of the Premier League table. Emphatic victory. In the end, yep. Listen, look, I think Arsenal were they didn't need to really come out of second gear. If I'm being totally honest with you, they weren't exhilarating. It wasn't, you know, beautiful football and all the stuff that we might potentially associate Arsenal with in terms of their style of play and stuff like that. But listen, ultimately you don't really care. You just want to get the 3 points on the board and be able to move on, just like they did against Manchester United in the first game of the season. But this time obviously they were able to get a few more goals. As I mentioned before, we're going to speak about Gyokeres. He got himself 2 goals. One was his, would we say, quote unquote, signature kind of finish, and then the second one was a penalty. But I wanted to more focus on his style of play and how I felt he kind of was in the game, man, because it's an interesting one. Listen, Arsenal fans will tell you they've been talking about grabbing a striker for absolutely ages. They've been crying about it for time. It felt like it was a position that they needed in order for them to make that next step. Um, whether they've had another striker in mind, I know there was talks about Sesko and all of that kind of stuff, but they got in Viktor Gyökeres, played that first game against Manchester United. I didn't really say anything. I didn't really want to I don't want to get onto someone in their first game. Do you know what I mean? They just, you know what? He's not a player on my team, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. And it was interesting trying to see how he would then perform in a game like this. Newly promoted side, you're clearly the better team, and you're at home as well. So let's see how you can kind of do. Are Arsenal going to potentially change the way that they kind of played? And it was very similar. I'll be honest. In my opinion, again, listen, Arsenal fans might come here and start shouting at me. Ultimately, it's your team, so you guys will be able to tell us anyway, guys who are just watching it from the outside. But just from what I saw, how I interpreted it, and stuff like that, I think when you're looking at someone like Gyokeres, in terms of his own style of play, what made him such a lethal forward in the last 2 seasons, I'm still struggling to kind of see that with Arsenal at this current moment in time. Again, listen, if he can play like this all the time and get himself goals, it won't matter, because then you end up just becoming accustomed to that, and that just being the norm, over a period of time. So that's not going to be, necessarily too much of an issue. A team that I think someone like Gyokeres would have been really good at if they didn't have, probably the best striker in world football right now is probably Manchester City, in terms of the way that they play, the way that they create chances for their striker, Erling Haaland. I think Gyokeres is more in that kind of mold, a player who we're going to fashion the chances for you. We're going to play for you. Arsenal don't really play like that, in my personal opinion, in terms of the way that they do actually play. When you're looking at Gyokeres and obviously looking at him against Leeds, in terms of the positions and stuff like that, he was obviously taking up. You can obviously see here, Arsenal, their kind of shape, obviously typical 4-3-3. Obviously, have your two centre backs kind of pushed up. Declan Rice, dropping in. Zubimendi just a little bit in front of him, and then you've kind of got Gyokeres, who's number 14 there. You can see he's not even the furthest forward player for the majority of that game. He was kind of dotted around, trying to pick up the ball, trying to get himself a little bit more involved. Now, I heard him speak after the game, and he was talking about, obviously didn't have much of a preseason, still getting used to the team. And listen, like I said, this isn't even me trying to crash it on him or anything like that. It's just more of an analysis, as I always try to do, just trying to almost just analyze the kind of player, someone, like Viktor Gyökeres is. Will he obviously work out? I hope not, for Arsenal's sake, but listen, it is what it is. I think he's a very, very good striker, and you can tell even with the first goal that he did score. Again, as I mentioned before, signature move, but ultimately that's the kind of thing that he wants to do, coming in off that left-hand side, being able to shift it a little bit, and then boom, right into, and he went the other way. And I think, could the keeper have done better? Maybe, but listen, there was a lot of players in front of him at the time, so it would have been difficult to be able to stop that. But I'm looking here, and this is his heat map, by the way, and he played 90 minutes. Now, it doesn't matter if, in my opinion anyway, this doesn't really matter if, for example, he's getting a lot of chances anyway. I think this year, that's when I look at something like this and I say, oh yeah, you know what? If he's not getting that many, if he's getting a lot of chances anyway, and this is your heat map, then it's not really going to make too much of a difference. But he didn't really get that many chances in the game. And I still think, and again, it's the early stages, people. So this isn't a crash out. Like I said before, I just wanted to just kind of talk about it because a lot of people have been getting onto Gyokeres and, oh, he looks clunky, he looks this, he looks that. And ultimately he done exactly what they signed him to do, which is get the goals, and he got that, today. So as I said before, if he continues like this, it really won't matter, in terms of, you can do all the tactics in the world, it'll be all irrelevant if he keeps putting the ball, in the back of the net when he gets his chances. And for me, with the way that Arsenal play, that's kind of how I thought it was going to kind of happen. A game like this kind of performance for him and for the team is exactly what I think will happen in the season, which is not going to get that many chances. But when you do get the chances, can you put them in the back of the net? I think he's a player who can do that. I think he's clinical enough to be able to do so. But again, it just depends on whether you feel there's going to be certain games where you might want him to be a little bit more involved and stuff like that. That's fair. And people say that about Erling Haaland anyway. In certain big games, he's not really involved, not really doing anything. But for the majority of a season, he is going to be the one scoring the goals. So you take what you can kind of get. I'll be honest with you. Everybody wants a striker. We talk about so many different strikers, the Isaks, the Ekatikes, the Seskos, the Vissas, the Mateta. We always talk about these strikers, and people love them, and rightly so. In most cases, they're players who like to drop deep. They're players who can bring others into play, can hold up play really, really well. They can pop it off. They can finish. They can get into the box. They can drift out wide, and all of these different things. He's not really like that. I don't look at Gyokeres, necessarily like that. I look at Gyokeres and think, this guy's a focal point in a team. Hence why he was so good for Sporting Lisbon. He's their best player ultimately. So they're always going to try and look for him, but they're always looking for him. There were points in that game, and I was watching Arsenal and I was like, you're not finding him. And the thing is, he's not necessarily showing visible frustration, but it'll be like situations like this where, for example, if you guys can obviously see this here, what I saw him do quite a lot, and it was good and bad. What I did see him do quite a lot in the game was he would always be on that kind of shoulder of the centre back, whether it might be at the time, right? Whether it's the right side of centre back or the left side of centre back. And of course, what he wants to do is make someone to play that ball into him, for him to be able to, of course, run into, and then he can do, whatever it is he kind of wants to do. But you'd always kind of be hearing, again, this is just the lineup that obviously they started with. Sometimes it might be, he wants the ball, of course, to be played in there. But Arsenal don't really kind of do that. With them, it's kind of, they'll do things like this. Odegaard might have the ball here. He passes it into Saka, and of course he passes it into Saka. They try to double up on him. He's obviously going to make that run. Timber, who by the way was absolutely excellent at right back, really, really good defender, to be honest. Probably one of the best right backs, if not the best right back in the Premier League at this moment in time. But he's going to then play that ball here, or he's going to play that ball there for Timber to be able to run into, and then of course they're going to go, into that kind of mold. But that's kind of what Arsenal were doing. It was, even with like Odegaard, when he was on the pitch before he obviously came off with injury, it was like slow, kind of, methodical, popping the ball in here. And the thing is, Gyokeres is constantly doing this. Let me even make the screen a little bit bigger if you guys can obviously see it. But Gyokeres is constantly going up and down, trying to make those runs and, all of that kind of stuff. But it's just not really working out. Now, again, like I said, it's still early for Gyokeres. So there's still time anyway, in terms of for the team to get used to him to get used to the team, Arteta to also build throughout the season, because, things kind of change a little bit, whether it changed for the better or worse. Obviously, of course, that remains to be seen. But yeah, that was kind of one of the things that I kind of noticed, with Arsenal and, with Gyokeres, is that he can keep doing all of this running up and down, but that's not really his kind of thing, if I'm being honest, with you. Let's go back here to, when we're looking at his heat map of the game. Do you get what I'm saying? Like that's not really, he's not really on all of that. Do you get what I mean? And now, like I said, these kind of things will take time in order for him to get used to it. But I'm just watching and I'm still struggling to see how does this kind of work? How's this gonna, kind of fit? Because you're a team that always want to have possession. You're a team that, you love to pop the ball about, passes into, let's move that over here. So you got passes, obviously him, and then obviously maybe it's a Declan Rice. Maybe he might try to play that ball, into Madueke, so he can obviously get in, which he did a couple of times. Saka, obviously the same thing. Arsenal, obviously the centre backs, obviously popping out here, popping into midfield. It's a lot of passing and it's a lot of good, what I say, keeping possession, pretty well. But again, we're talking about the striker here specifically. And if he's content, and there was a few times I saw him make this run, Timber's not playing the ball, or whoever it was, Calafiori, or whoever, Miles Lewis Skelly, I can't remember exactly who it was at the time. But there was a couple of times I'm watching, they're not really playing the passes. And the thing is, if you just played it in, he would actually just be free. Now, whether that's because Arsenal don't have like a Kevin De Bruyne, a Trent Alexander-Arnold, a Pedri, like they don't really have that kind of player who can just pop it in or play it down the lines, play it into the channels and play it into those kind of. I don't really. I'm not saying they don't have players who can't do it, but they don't have a, would I say, quote unquote, designated really player. Like I just mentioned Trent and KDB. Those are they do that. That's what they do. Do you get what I'm trying to say? They will do that in order to release players like Mohamed Salah, Erling Haaland, and all these kind of stuff. Arsenal not really like that. I saw in that first half anyway when I'm watching it. You're seeing Madueke and Saka. I thought they were kind of poor in the game. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who was worse, to be honest, but they were just kind of poor watching them. But the whole front three was poor. No movement. Very static. Madueke, he's obviously over there trying to do whatever it is he's trying to do. Saka plotted out here on the right hand side. So now you just got, obviously I get it because you obviously want to leave enough space for Timber to be able to run into, and then Erdegaard obviously runs into there, and at times you've got like a triangle of players here, and then they can obviously play it around with each other here. But Gyokeres kind of just like a lone ranger here. Where does he go? Do I run here? Do I cut back? Or do I go to the far stick kind of thing? He's just kind of there. Again, that's more to do with understanding your team and stuff like that. But Arsenal are not, it's like you're not at this moment, you're not really playing for him. I'll be honest with you. And in my opinion, I feel, again, they've just signed Eze, and who I think is an absolutely brilliant player. Always wanted him in my team. Kind of disappointed that we didn't, go out and sign someone like him. But listen, he's gone to Arsenal. Could he be the player that can start to unlock someone like a Viktor Gyökeres? We'd have to wait and see. Can he do it? Of course he can. As I mentioned, he's an absolutely brilliant player. So maybe that's something that they're going to potentially look at moving forward. But that was kind of just really it for me in terms of watching Gyokeres' performance. It wasn't to crash on him, wasn't to get onto him or anything like that. Not at all. Listen, he scored 2 goals. That shuts a lot of people up, to be honest with you. And he, we saw with the celebration and stuff like that. Just a little, would I say, kind of nod to everybody that had been kind of getting onto him about, the more touches of your head and of the ball and stuff like that. And that's absolutely fair. And listen, it's just all banter at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm just watching, Gyokeres at this moment in time. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is really a player that I feel you can get more out of this kind of player, but you're going to need to change up the way that you kind of play in order to be able to do that. Will Arteta do that? I don't know. That again remains to be seen, and we'll just have to wait on that. But yeah, still a bit more of a work in progress. I think for Arsenal moving forward, I do think defensively, I know everyone uses rest defense. That's kind of like the buzzword nowadays. But yeah, defensively, to me, Arsenal look really, really good. Going forward, I still think, yeah, it's like there's no real creativity kind of I don't know. It's like there's no spontaneity, whatever the word is, that's kind of going on with you guys. It just seems very. The thing is that it's very methodical and stuff, and it's funny because I know someone put out a tweet, talking about, Arsenal, and I know, in fact, no, a lot of people put out tweets about Arsenal, and the way that they kind of play is kind of boring and etc. And I hear it, I do hear it, but it seems like those are the teams that are winning the Premier League. Liverpool last season, poor to watch, won the Premier League due to consistency. We've seen Chelsea do it in the past. We've seen United do it in the past. We've seen Manchester City obviously do it in the past as well. So yeah, that might just be a theme going forward. Maybe Arteta's seen that theme and said, bro, we need to stifle the shit out of this game, but ultimately we're going to win the Premier League due to our kind of consistency. So yeah, it's an interesting one with Viktor Gyökeres, interesting one with Arsenal as well. I would like to know what you guys think in regards to his performance in general, but also just Arsenal in terms of how you're seeing them, how you view them, in terms of, are they a team that look like a threat? Obviously, it's 2 games. I like I'll be surprised if anyone's like, yeah, they're going to be amazing, but I will also be surprised if you think that they're going to be quite poor, this season. But listen, man, like I said, I would like to know what everybody thinks. Let me know in the comment section, peeps. I'll catch you guys soon. Peace.